COVID will also be remembered as a tumultuous time for marriages and relationships, many broken irretrievably, but many also survive. You got a minute to call someone you know and tell them to tune into this program. Also, in about 20 minutes, a Brooklyn student you will be proud of will be chatting with Alonta Wrighton. She is the host and producer of Young Academic Achievers. COVID, broken marriages and relationships that went nowhere, but then there are survivors. My guest to discuss all this is a college professor, a pastor, a marriage counselor, a therapist, and a man who so many people have said thanks to. Dr. Roger Ball, welcome again to Brooklyn 45.
Thank you very much. Great to be here and great to be with you. Very much appreciate you having me on.
People are asking the question, after COVID, will life ever be the same again? From your perspective, what is your response to that question?
Well, we do know that COVID-19 has changed the world, right? I don't think that we will, as much as we yearn for some normalcy, I think just the way society is structured, just the way we think about space and time with interacting with each other, including our intimate relationships, I think that I don't think we'll go back to the same. I think we'll go back differently, but I don't think we'll go back to the same.
Let's talk about some of the challenges that have caused many relationships to go on the rocks. From your own experiences, because I know you're a pastor, you're a professor, some of the students in your class, some of them are married. You are a marriage counselor, you're a therapist. What would you say from those experiences in response to my question?
Well, John Westeroff says this about the rhythms of life. He says that we are made for traditions or for rituals, and in the end, rituals make us, right? So it's the rhythm of life, it's the day-to-day grind, it's the getting up a certain time, making your oatmeal or your coffee or your tea and saying good morning and I'm out to work, or all of those rhythms that we come to, depend on and that comes to ground us in a way. What COVID essentially did, it completely upended all of those rhythms. And so as a consequence of that, we saw people, children, school buildings were emptied out, restaurants were emptied out, places of employment were emptied out. And you have so many families cramming under the same roof 24 hours a day. If we remember, March, April, May, June of last year, and even into the winter. And so that disruption of the rhythms cause people to sort of bump into each other. Right? We love each other and we tolerate each other well, but when we're stuck under the same roof for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, it changes everything. And so some of those disruptions, like kids going to school from home, parents going to work from home, what we've seen with that is that it has put tremendous pressure and stress with families because they don't always know how to navigate living with, whomever for 7 hours, right? And then we go to bed and then we get up and we go our separate ways and then we come back again and we do it all over again. But when we are locked in and then the stress that goes with it, unemployment, people have gotten sick, the anxiety and depression, what I have seen is I've seen so many couples who have filed for divorce, who have separated, and some of them just came to, they've come to me when it's too late because, COVID has, and here's the other point I would like to make. When relationships are unhealthy during crises, those crises usually cause some of those, dysfunctions to surface in bright colors. And so it even puts further strain on those relationships.
So how can you get those relationships back on track?
How can they get it back on track?
Yeah. And and what advice can you give to help them get those relationships back on track?
Right. And so a number of things. One, and in my work, one of the things that I am always humbled by is when I see couples that are able to really look inward, to face their dysfunctions, to face their shortcomings, to face the things that are not working in their relationship and say, we want to do the work. And so, and part of that is, and when people think about counseling and therapy, you know, they think that we're trying to, you know, tinker with their brains or something like that. But essentially what it is reestablishing things like trust, norming certain rhythms, like showing appreciation. For example, the research is clear that for every one negative encounter, or, you know, every time one, you know, a couple butt heads together, for every one negative encounter, you need a minimum of 5 positive encounters. So one of the things that I say to couples is like, how many times are you bumping heads together? How many times are you, you know, being unhappy with each other? And then I want for you to look at how many positive interactions you're having. Usually in a relationship that is not healthy or happy, usually have more negative encounters than positive. And so the work that I oftentimes do with couples is something like showing gratitude, showing appreciation for the small things, the big things, and to completely saturate those relationships with gratitude and appreciation and saying thank you and I appreciate you. Building things like those in place, you slowly begin to see couples turn off the negativity and what they call the negative sip, just looking for the bad, just looking for the negative, just looking for the things that aren't working. And then all of a sudden they start looking for the things that are good and appreciate it. Simple moves like those can really transform a relationship.
Well, that's the advice that you're giving, but there are a lot of people who do not seek advice because of the stigma associated to, well, I need to find someone who can get into my head and who can get into my business.
Right.
And the fear that talking to a counselor, talking to a therapist may not work at all. What do you say to people who have these fears?
And I encounter that. I encounter that very often, frankly, especially in our community, in my community, in the Black and Brown community, where you've just been, since we were children, we were taught whatever happens in this house, it stays in this house. Whatever takes place, it happens behind closed door, it stays here. And there's something, admittedly so, that seem absurd of inviting a third person to help us fix all that's wrong, right? It's just, especially for those who are very practical, and then, you know, if a car is broken down, you could use a tool and fix it. Here's what I tell them. Mm-hmm. It is just like teaching a child how to read or how to write, or how to do any other thing, or teaching an adult new career and to right? I see it as a tool. I see it as having a tool bag, right? For example, listening skills, for example, reflecting skills, for example, you know, speaking and listening and empathizing, right? And some of those pieces that I just talk about. Some people say that I'm not used to giving compliments. In the household that I grew up in, we didn't kiss each other. You know, there was no whole lot of kissing and hugging going on. You know how I showed you that I loved you? By going out and making money and and paying the bills. And so what it is really helping people to transform their thinking and say, here are some simple tools, right? Here's a piece of homework, right? Right? You haven't gone out on a date in a while? Here are some things that you could do, right? You haven't sat down and broke bread together as a family? Here's something, right? Today you have everyone getting their plates, and this one disappear in this room, this one disappear in the living room, that one goes in the bedroom. And families are not eating together. And what the research shows again and again, if you create this space, if you create that sacred space, if you create the space at the table where we're breaking bread together, hey, how was your day? Oh, I had a horrible day today. Yeah. Well, what about you? How was school today? It was all right. That kind of space, it allows for, it kicks back depression. It reduces suicidal ideation, right? And it reduces conflict. If you create the space for people to break bread together, play games together, have fun together, both kids and adults alike, what it really does, it creates a new paradigm, but people have to be willing to do it, to really establish, and in some cases, establish those traditions.
Dr. Wall, you talked about shared spaces and the importance of these shared spaces being sacred. But what about physical spaces? For example, I've heard of instances where the husband would decide that he doesn't want to sleep with his wife and he's got his own space, and vice versa. How do you get people away from these spaces that do not allow them to communicate with each other?
Yeah, it's a good question. And unfortunately, we see today more than we would like to admit it, right? One of this, I oftentimes say to couples, we live in the houses that we create, right? We live in the spaces that we create, and people don't just sleep in separate quarters or on the couch or in the living room or, in some other, in the kids' bedroom or wherever it is, when things are going well, right? When things are going well, people, they are together. They cultivate those shared relationships and shared space. So usually the thing to do is not to start with the space, though the space sort of becomes the symptom that something is wrong, right? If I'm sleeping in another room, it means something is not right, right? And so it's to get beneath that. And usually it's some form of displeasure, frustration, there's not enough money, and maybe one person is making the money and the other person, is paying their half of the bills, and the other person has more money, but it's not being shared equally, or the responsibility, or maybe one person is taking care of the kids and the other person is just not doing it. And so a person may say, you know what? If you're not helping me out in this house, if you're not helping with the bills, if you're not providing the support, whether it's emotional support, whether it's physical support, whether it's chores or whatever it is, then I don't want to be with you. And then what begins to happen is both persons have legitimate grievances, but they just can't hear the other, because everybody's pain is the most important pain in the moment. And so what do? We stonewall, we withdraw, we engage in disrespectful behavior, criticism, and it just keeps going down. And sometimes it turns into months and sometimes years, right? People who have been married, young marriages, no intimacy for a very long time. And so if we can really get them at the table together and really create this space again where each person can say, these are my concerns. This is how you hurt me. Like, you really, really hurt me. You hurt me when you said this, or you hurt me when you left me out there to dry. You left me on my own. When I was sick, you didn't support me. When I had COVID, I thought you would have shown up more, but you were in your own head. And so I almost died and you didn't support me. Those kind of, fractures are repairable, but you have to get to the heart of it. And the way to do that is to bring them together, create this space, speaking and listening, a safe space where people could really say exactly what they're feeling, and have the person say, I hear you. I heard you when you said that you feel betrayed by me. What can I do to make it right?
What do you say to people who believe that they're doing all of the work? They're concerned that they seem to be doing all of the work. And what do you say to them? Do you tell them to be persistent in making an effort to get through to the other half, whether it's in a marriage or in a relationship?
Rarely is any one person doing all of the work, right? And you usually get that when you're only talking to one of the parties, right? By the time you get both persons in the same space, then usually you discover that both persons have their, but it becomes really difficult. And so here's what I see often. Once one party or one spouse comes to me and they said, you know what, this thing is awful, I need some help. The marriage is falling apart, the relationship is falling apart, the kids are not benefiting from this relationship, it's going downhill. I need help. Honestly, usually it's my sisters, the woman who says that we need some help. And more often than not, my brothers are saying that I don't need a counselor to come tell me what to do, right? And so what happens is that I probably, even within the last 3 weeks, I probably had 6 couples that it just didn't sign up for counseling. Why? Because more often than not, the brothers are saying that I don't want to come sit down and talk to you about what's going on. Usually, if I get him at the table long enough, maybe 2 sessions, he usually say, whoa, okay, all right, I could dig this. It doesn't feel as threatening, but just making that first step that one person who's doing their best to try to preserve the marriage, they want it to work. The other person who is reluctant, oftentimes they want it to work as well. But to come to the space of doing the work, that's usually where making the first step is very hard for some people, because they've never gotten counseling. They don't trust it. They see it as like, getting into their head. It's not something, it's telling people your personal business, and the shame that's involved in it. It puts out your weaknesses and your dysfunction on the table. But they don't understand that the role of the counselor is not to judge, is not to pass judgment, is not to make them feel bad about themselves, but truly to come alongside and to support and help them do the work in making their relationships better. And let me just give a plug here for premarital counseling. Nobody should get married without getting some premarital counseling.
Well, premarital counseling. We've talked a lot about marital counseling. But what about these people who are in a relationship, they're not married, they don't live together, they have to talk to each other on the phone, but they love each other and they look forward to the day when they can be together. But they have these fears. They have these fears of not knowing the person, or some of the information that they're getting from talking to them on the phone are turning them off. What do you say to them in terms of the future that they are perhaps looking for?
Yeah, this is a topic that I'm very intrigued by. I've looked at the scholarship, I've done the research, and in fact, recently just published a book on that, on deconstructing love, because I was very, very curious. I wanted to know, what does the sociological data says? What does the theological data says? What does the psychological data says about the mechanics of falling in love, about even just like getting to know the person? And I think there's a part of society today, especially once you reach a certain age, that the working assumption, is that every relationship should lead to marriage. And that's dangerous, isn't it? There need to be trial relationship, and you need to take the time to get to know the person. And when you start seeing, all of us put our best foot forward. If I ask you, tell me, if I'm meeting you for the first time and I ask you, tell me a little bit about yourself, you're not going to say, well, I have a back problem, or I have this going on, or I have that going on. No, or what we tend to do is we tend to put our best foot forward. And in intimate relationships, that's what we do. And that's why you need time to date, time to court, time to spend time together, and pay, the name of the book is, Deconstructing Love with your eyes wide open. Like, pay attention. And when you see it, as Maya Angelou says, when someone shows you themselves, believe it the first time around.
I think we've got just over a minute left. What do you say about the importance of maintaining broader connections? Today we have the internet. We have friends who can't visit us, but we can continue relationships and phone conversations and video conversations with these people. What about the importance of that in keeping a relationship healthy and keeping a marriage healthy?
Yeah, I think that communication is the key. Someone says that we're born into community and we die into community. And that's just a fact, right? And so, there's persons who have long distance relationship, and those are, tenuous at best, or family members and friends. Use the technology, and especially if people live alone during these lonely times, connect with, reestablish relationship. Think about the people that are meaningful to you. Think about the relationships that are meaningful to you, right? And really, sometimes their spouses overseas and in other parts, as well, and grandparents and all of these folks. Keep open communication, because at the end of the day, the depth of our engagement and interactions and connections with each other is a representation of our mental health, our emotional health, and oftentimes our physical health. We cannot live without connection. It's a primary thing that makes us human beings, that we are connected with each other. And so those relationships are critical. And especially if they're fractured, it makes it just that much worse. So it's important to maintain those connections through mediums like these, and texting and WhatsApp and all of those things.
Dr. Roger Ball, I want to thank you for being my guest and for sharing that information. And of course, we are inviting people to take a look at your book and to purchase your book as well. And it's going to be up on the screen so they can all see it. But thank you so much for being my guest here on Brooklyn 45.
Thank you so much, Mr. Taitt. Really appreciate being here, and have a good day. And hello to your to your audience. Thank you for having me again.
Okay, and now we go to Alonta Wrighton. Alonta.
Thank you, Sam. So joining us, representing culturally rich Bedford-Stuyvesant, we are pleased to have Esayah Edghill, an elementary school valedictorian, a musician, Taekwondo brown belt, and lifetime scholar. Esayah will be entering 8th grade at NEST+M this fall with a grade point average of 98.25. Welcome to Brooklyn 45, Esayah.
Glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure. So let's get ready to celebrate you.
All right.
Starting with the academics, what are some of the classes you've taken in school, and what was your favorite class?
Well, we have all the usual curriculum classes. Math, ELA, social studies, science, but we also have extracurriculars like Spanish, music, theater, and robotics. If I had to choose one, I'd say my favorite is math because I enjoy how logical it is and I like to problem solve. Usually, although there might be many ways to get to an answer, there's always one correct answer, which I think I like.
Okay, so since we're talking really quick about the academics, is there any other subject that you just love besides mathematics?
I would say social studies because I enjoy debating with facts because there's always more than one side to a situation or an argument.
I like that. So now let's talk about Esayah, the musician. What instruments do you play, and which is your favorite?
Well, right now I'm playing upright bass, bass clarinet, and piano. And if I had to pick a favorite, I would say piano because of how versatile it is. You can play chords, you can play melodies, and you can play bass lines, and you can do all of that at the same time. So you can layer the sounds to make beautiful music. It's also a very simple instrument because all of the notes are just laid out in front of you. You don't need to memorize any fingerings or anything. So what I'll do is I'll often learn a piece on the piano before I transfer it to another instrument like the bass.
Okay, so 3 instruments. That's impressive. That's very impressive. So in celebrating your academic success today, to pay it forward, how would you approach and ensure academic excellence in your work? And 2, what advice would you give other students to support their academic success?
Well, a big part of academic excellence for me is definitely time management. So for me, that looks like starting my work early, having a diligent work schedule, and revising and editing as much as I need to. So I'll work in a way to avoid feeling overwhelmed because I dislike doing a lot of work at once. Think of it like a puzzle. You don't really throw a lot of pieces onto it at once and hope for the best. Instead, you'll work slowly and carefully to make sure everything comes together nicely.
Okay, sound advice. Thank you. Greatest accomplishments. What are some of yours?
Definitely one of my greatest accomplishments was being valedictorian at PS11. It was a huge honor. I was really proud of my achievements. Another big honor would have to be playing jazz in the Appel Room with the Middle School Jazz Academy, because jazz at Lincoln Center in general is like one of the most prestigious venues to showcase musical talent, and being able to play there was like really, really a great honor.
That really is a great honor. You've done a lot, and I know you're proud. So you talked about time management, you talked about your academic success, and you gave some tips and some advice to other scholars and other students, and we appreciate that. So there you have it. We have this scholar, Esayah Edghill. Thank you so much for joining Brooklyn 45 today. Is there any one last word you'd like to say before we sign off?
Thanks for having me.
It's been our pleasure. You've enriched us and encouraged us by your presence and your intellect today. Thank you so much, and thank you to your family. I am Alonta Wrighton, and back to you, Sam.
Thank you, Alonta. We invite you who have watched this program to partner with Brooklyn 45. You can do this in several ways. You can suggest topics or issues that you want us to provide information about it. Just go to our website, www.brooklyn45.com. Become a supporter. We are a 501c3 not-for-profit community TV program. And when you support us, our communities benefit as well. And so do you. So please support us and tell everyone you know on social media about us. On behalf of our Brooklyn 45 team, I'm Sam Taitt.
Brooklyn 45 is a 501c3 not-for-profit, and we welcome your support. Check out our website, brooklyn45.com, and feel free to donate or share it with your friends and family. Have any comments or questions? Send them to our Facebook, facebook.com/Brooklyn45TV. If you have any questions or topics you think we should cover next, shoot me an email over at brooklyn45tv@gmail.com. Thank you again for watching.